royal family is celebrating Prince George's 12th birthday today. It's a milestone for the second in line to the throne, marking major new life changes.
Prince George's 12th birthday started with sunshine, laughter, and a house full of balloons. But by afternoon, the joy disappeared. His best friend, Orla the dog, was suddenly taken away without warning. Behind it all was Queen Camilla. That single act didn't just break George's heart, it caused a royal fight so deep that it shook the entire palace from inside out. And mind you, this could be one of the moments you never prepared for. Join us as we unveil why Camilla chose to hurt the young Prince George on his birthday. The day Queen Camilla crossed the line. The warm summer light gently poured through the tall old trees standing proudly around Sandringham, one of the most treasured hideouts of the British royal family. It was a special day, July 27, 2025, marking the 12th birthday of Prince George Alexander Louis.
Well, for many kids, turning 12 means just one more year before being a teenager, but for Prince George, it means a real ramping up of his royal training.
The first child of William and Kate, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. The morning carried a certain excitement in the air, almost as if the world around him was quietly celebrating the young boy who would one day become king. George didn't sleep that day. He woke up earlier than usual, his blue eyes glowing with happiness. He had a wide, joyful smile on his face as he jumped out of bed and changed into his favorite t-shirt, the one he got for his last birthday. On the shirt was a cute paw print, a special reminder of Orla, his fluffy cocker spaniel and most loyal friend. To George, Orla was more than a dog. She was a piece of his heart, a comforting presence who brought laughter and calm in a life where everything else had rules and formality.
Eldest son, and he seems to be having a wondrous day. One picture shows him playing with the family dog.
Since he was little, Orla had never left his side. She had raced through the fields with him, listened quietly when he shared his secrets, and stayed close when the world felt too heavy. George had been looking forward to this day not just because of the cake and presents, but because he had a small performance planned, just a fun little act with Orla. He wanted to show his family a few lighthearted tricks with his pet, something playful and personal. His younger sister Charlotte, who was full of mischief at just 10 years old, would help by holding Orla's leash and calling out commands. Meanwhile, their energetic 7-year-old brother Louis would be clapping and cheering them on. It wasn't anything big or fancy, but to George it mattered. It was his way of showing that even though he was born into royalty, he was still just a kid who loved spending time laughing and playing with his dog and siblings. The birthday celebration itself was small and warm, just the way Kate and William wanted it to be. They had chosen to keep it private, only inviting close family members like Kate's parents and siblings, along with a few of William's old friends from his university days. There were no news cameras or grand public shows. It was just a peaceful gathering in the quiet beauty of Sandringham, where the children could run around freely, laugh out loud, and enjoy the day without worrying about royal rules or formal traditions. With its wide gardens, sparkling lakes, and fresh open air, Sandringham was the perfect place for a prince to enjoy being a regular boy, if only for a little while. Kate, always thoughtful and full of care, had poured her heart into every detail of George's birthday celebration. From the soft white cake shaped like a fairy tale castle to the colorful balloons decorated with little dog prints, everything was planned with love. She wanted her children to have memories full of laughter and warmth, far away from the weight of royal life. William, standing quietly nearby, watched his wife move around with a gentle smile. He knew this was her way of protecting their children's happiness, creating a world where they could simply be kids. But the peaceful mood didn't last long. Just when everything was falling into place, someone unexpected showed up. Camilla, the Queen Consort and wife of King Charles III. She hadn't been on the original guest list, but at the last moment, King Charles had asked William to let her attend. Wanting to keep the family at peace, William and Kate reluctantly agreed, though deep inside they both felt uneasy about it. Camilla's black limousine arrived a bit later than the others, slowly pulling up to the entrance. Dressed in a shiny light blue silk gown, she stepped out with quiet grace, her face calm, hiding any hint of how she truly felt. She looked around with a stiff expression, clearly uncomfortable with what she saw. Children giggling, balloons swaying in the breeze, and Orla, the happy cocker spaniel, darting around the garden, chasing after a ball tossed by George. Joyful barks filled the air, mixing with the cheerful sounds of the kids playing. But to Camilla, who had always disliked animals, especially dogs, this playful scene looked messy and unfit for a royal event. She adjusted her dress and moved carefully as Orla ran by, then leaned close to her most trusted attendant, the one who had stood by her side for years. With a firm, cold whisper, she gave a quiet command. Orla had to be taken away immediately. In her eyes, a dog didn't belong at such an occasion. Without a second thought, the attendant nodded. He had long learned that Camilla expected everything to be just the way she liked it, and she wouldn't back down, not even for a child's birthday. Without telling anyone, Orla was quietly led away through a back gate. Still wagging her tail, the dog happily followed, thinking it was just another game. But instead of fun, she was placed in a car and driven far from the estate, all the way to a farm miles away. Kate and William didn't know. Nobody was told. Camilla calmly returned to the party, sipping a drink and smiling as though nothing had changed. She even lifted a toast to George, completely unaware that her action had just opened the door to a storm that could shake the family's peace. The games went on, and George, still full of laughter, played with Charlotte and Louis, enjoying the simple joy of the day. But quietly, something had shifted. A deep sense of wrongness had started to settle in the air, unspoken but heavy. The bond between George and Orla was no small thing, and when he discovered she was missing, that warm birthday smile might turn into heartbreak. And then the question would rise, how would a family that worked so hard to stay united handle the fallout of such a quiet betrayal? Let's find out. Exposing Camilla's action. As the morning sun climbed higher into the sky, its golden light washed over the beautiful gardens and still lakes of Sandringham, casting a magical glow across the estate. It was the perfect scene for Prince George's special day, the birthday of the boy who would one day wear the crown. The party had already come alive with laughter and cheerful games.
Well, the Prince and Princess of Wales have shared a rare video of Prince George's 12th birthday celebrations, hand in hand with Princess Charlotte.
Children were running across the grass chasing balloons decorated with cute dog designs, while Charlotte and Louis played hide and seek, their giggles echoing between the old garden walls. George, with his sparkling birthday hat that looked like a tiny crown, made his way to the center of the lawn dot.
The little prince isn't so little anymore, just 1 year shy of becoming a full-blown...
It was time for the yearly family photo, a cherished tradition that was more than just a picture. It was a symbol of love, of closeness, and this year, of the joy their dog Orla had brought by giving birth to a litter of tiny, fluffy puppies. George had been excited all morning, looking forward to posing with his beloved Orla by his side. He smiled, turned toward the trees, and whistled happily, calling for his four-legged friend like he always did. This moment was supposed to be perfect. He expected Orla to come running like she always did, tail wagging wildly, tongue out, perhaps even with one of her pups bouncing beside her. But something felt strange. No bark came, no excited paws thudding across the grass, just nothing. George's smile faded instantly as he looked around. His eyes moved quickly across the lawn, searching every corner. He called out again, louder this time, and his voice was laced with a growing fear. He couldn't understand why she wasn't coming. She had never ignored him before. Charlotte and Louis, still full of energy, joined the search, thinking their dog was simply being playful. They peeked behind bushes, crawled under benches, and even checked near the flowers. Charlotte tried to stay cheerful, guessing maybe Orla was busy with her puppies. But when not even the sound of paws brushing against the grass could be heard, even she grew quiet. George began to run around the garden, calling for Orla over and over. His heart pounded faster with each step, not from excitement but from worry. This wasn't a game anymore. It felt wrong, too quiet and empty. He searched every familiar hiding spot, but there was no sign of her. Not a bark, not a tail, not a paw print in the damp grass. The joy of his birthday started slipping away, replaced by a tight knot in his chest. As he rushed toward the far end of the yard, George noticed a man standing near the fence. He was one of the family's long-trusted staff, someone George had seen around for years. But today, the man looked different. His face was lined with stress, and he kept avoiding George's eyes. That alone made the prince's heart sink deeper. George ran straight to him, his voice shaking with a mix of panic and anger. He needed answers. He asked where Orla was and what had happened to the puppies. The man lowered his head and spoke in a low voice, barely above a whisper. He looked nervous, like he wasn't supposed to say anything, but the few words he managed to say were enough to crush George's heart because Orla had been taken away. Those words hit George so hard he could barely breathe. His face turned red, his fists clenched, and tears welled in his eyes. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. On his birthday, his best friend and his dog, who had been with him through every moment of childhood, was gone. He asked again and again, desperate to know who had done this and why, but the man wouldn't say more. He simply stood in silence, eyes heavy with guilt. In that quiet moment, George didn't need to hear more. The silence said it all. This wasn't an accident. Someone with great authority had made this decision without thinking of how much it would hurt him. The joy of the day vanished, replaced by a deep sense of heartbreak and confusion. And for the first time, the young prince felt what it truly meant to have love taken away, not by time or distance, but by someone's choice. Catherine, known to many as Kate, the Princess of Wales, was standing not too far away, placing a fresh bunch of flowers on the table. Her smile was soft, calm, and full of warmth. But in a flash, her mother's heart told her something wasn't right. She looked up and saw George standing there, his shoulders drooping and his face drained of color. Without waiting another second, she rushed to him, wrapping her arms tightly around his shoulders, pulling him close like any mother would when her child was hurting. George tried to explain, but his voice wobbled as he held back tears. He managed to say enough. Orla was gone. Someone had taken her away. The words hit Kate like a splash of freezing water. Her heart dropped. She didn't ask more questions there. Instead, she stood up straight and quickly called over one of the palace's most trusted staff members, a woman who had been by the family's side for years. Without saying much, Kate led her inside and firmly closed the door behind them, keeping everyone else out. Inside, her gentle expression vanished. Her voice, strong and fierce, demanded the truth. She wanted to know exactly what had happened to Orla and didn't want lies or silence. Her son was in pain, and that meant something had gone terribly wrong. Under the pressure of Kate's sharp eyes and shaking voice, the woman gave in. Her face full of guilt, she admitted the truth. The decision to remove Orla hadn't come from just anyone. It had come from Queen Camilla. She had ordered the dog taken away quietly, not wanting it around, especially after finding out Orla had recently had puppies and was running freely across the party grounds. To her, it was a mess, not fit for a royal event. Kate froze. The words were like thunder crashing in her ears. All at once, Camilla's polite entrance, her painted smile, it all made sense now. This wasn't a small misunderstanding. This was deliberate. Kate had carefully planned this day to be special for George. The puppies were more than pets. They were a symbol of love and closeness, of the simple joys children should have. And now, someone had stepped in and destroyed that joy for reasons that made no sense. Her hands clenched into fists so tight, her nails pressed into her skin. Anger poured through her like waves crashing on rocks. How could Camilla do this, especially today, especially knowing how much George loved that dog? Orla wasn't just a pet. She was a part of their family, a gift from Kate's brother, a quiet friend who had stayed close to George through every tear, every lonely moment. And now she was gone, tossed aside as if she didn't matter. Kate's chest rose and fell as she tried to steady herself, but her face was flushed red with emotion. This wasn't just about a dog. It was about respect. It was about boundaries that had been crossed one too many times. Her thoughts raced back to old memories, moments when Camilla had gotten involved in William's life in ways that left wounds Kate had worked so hard to heal for the sake of the royal family.
I do think it's incredible how strong and how you've been able to cope, really. And I put that down to your really early years, childhood experience.
But now it has happened again, not to her, but to her child. She paced across the room, heart pounding, trying to calm the fury boiling inside her. This wasn't just rude, it was hurtful, selfish, and wrong. Camilla may carry the title of Queen Consort, but that didn't give her the right to make decisions that crushed a child's heart on his birthday. Kate took a deep breath and pushed the anger down just enough to step back outside with a composed face. But something inside her had changed. A quiet strength had settled deep in her chest. She wasn't going to let this pass without speaking up. Not this time. Not when it came to her son. Prince George's response to the situation. While the party carried on in the background, George sat quietly beneath one of the oldest trees in the garden, his arms wrapped around his knees and his eyes staring into nothing. He didn't care about the balloons floating above or the sounds of music and laughter echoing across the field. None of it mattered anymore. His heart was heavy with memories, sweet moments with Orla, the dog who had stayed by his side through sleepless nights in the palace, who listened when he whispered dreams of flying far away, dreams of freedom he couldn't say out loud to anyone else. Lately, with her soft little puppies crawling around her, she had brought even more happiness into his world. To George, they were more than animals. They felt like a new kind of family, but now she was gone. Not lost, not hiding, taken. And with her went a piece of his heart, like someone had reached in and pulled it out. Everything around him still looked bright and festive, but to George it all felt empty. The celebration meant nothing anymore. What was supposed to be his happiest day had turned into something he wanted to forget. Inside the house, Kate's heart burned with quiet fury. She could feel the storm growing inside her, and she knew she couldn't let this go unnoticed. Camilla's decision had left a scar on a moment meant for joy. Kate had worked too hard to protect her children's innocence to allow anyone to tear it apart. Something inside her had shifted, and she was ready to stand firm. What had started as a birthday had now become something much deeper, a test of loyalty, love, and boundaries. Outside, the mood had changed. The cheerful air now felt strange, heavy, like a storm cloud hiding behind the clear blue sky. Even the wind seemed to move differently. The family photo moment had arrived. The royal photographer, an older man with a practiced smile, was ready with his camera, standing by with careful hands, adjusting the lens and waiting for the perfect angle. The garden, bursting with summer flowers and sunlight, was the perfect stage. Family members began to take their places on the grass. William and Kate stood at the center, with Charlotte and Louis on either side, their cheerful grandparents smiling softly in the background. It should have been a peaceful, picture-perfect moment, but George didn't step forward. He stood back, arms folded across his chest, eyes focused on a quiet spot on the grass. A space that should have been filled by Orla, curled at his feet, tail wagging, ears perked, ready for the photo just like every other year. That spot now sat empty. And to George, it wasn't just grass. It was a reminder, a painful space that shouted louder than words. His face no longer held the light of a birthday boy. There were no tears. He had learned long ago how to hide those. But behind his silence was a storm no one could ignore. George could feel his heart beating fast, his chest tightening as a mix of sadness and anger swirled inside him. But even with all that emotion, he stood tall, refusing to let a single tear fall. Just then, his father, Prince William, walked toward him. He hadn't yet realized what had happened with Orla, and his face showed only concern, the kind of worry a father carries after living through the same pressures as a royal child. He softly urged his son to come take the family photo, telling him not to make things harder for the adults. It was something William had once heard growing up from his own father, King Charles. But this time, the words didn't land the same way. George didn't feel comforted. Instead, for the very first time, something lit up inside him, a quiet fire of defiance, not out of disrespect, but from the ache of being unheard. He slowly raised his head and looked directly into his father's eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice wasn't loud, but it carried strength, strong enough for everyone to hear. He made it clear that it wasn't him who made things difficult. It was the adults. They had taken Orla without asking, and to him a photo without her meant nothing. If she wasn't included, then he didn't want to be in it at all. His words hit like lightning. Silence fell over the garden. Guests who had been chatting and smiling just moments before now looked around in confusion. The Middletons exchanged nervous glances, unsure what had just unfolded. The photographer cleared his throat awkwardly, unsure whether to step back or continue. Charlotte clutched little Louis's hand tightly, her wide eyes locked on her older brother. She didn't fully understand everything, but she could feel that something serious had just happened. And to make everything worse, Camilla made comments that triggered everyone. The royal chaos. Not far away, Camilla stood watching. She had been quiet until now, but George's words pushed her forward. Her face tightened and she walked closer, clearly annoyed. Her tone was sharp and her words, spoken in front of everyone, carried judgment. She scolded George, calling his behavior childish and unfit for someone who would one day wear the crown. In her eyes, making such a big scene over a dog was silly. She told him to grow up and stop letting his feelings get in the way. The moment turned heavy. Every guest turned toward her. Her voice had cut through the air like a cold wind. But before anyone else could react, William stepped forward, now understanding what had truly happened. His expression changed completely. His face flushed, his jaw clenched, and without hesitation he defended his son. His voice was clear and firm, full of fatherly strength. He told Camilla she had no right to speak to George like that. He made it known that Orla was not just a pet. She was George's closest companion, someone who had brought comfort through the ups and downs of royal life. If she had been taken without their knowledge, that was the real mistake. Not George's feelings, not his reaction, and certainly not his refusal to smile for a picture. William's words landed like a blow. Camilla froze. Her face went pale, and the confidence she had walked in with vanished. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Around her, whispers started rising. The guests, once silent, were now murmuring with concern. Some looked away. Others shook their heads with quiet disappointment. Even the Middletons, who often kept their thoughts to themselves, were clearly unsettled. Camilla took a slow step back, her hand gripping the edge of her dress. For the first time that day, she looked like she didn't belong there, as if the celebration had gone on without her. The warmth she usually expected from the crowd was gone, replaced with cold glances and a sea of quiet judgment. And in that moment, standing under the summer sky, the party that had begun with so much joy had shifted forever. The moment fell into complete silence, a stillness heavy with emotion. It was clear something inside the royal family had quietly cracked, and everyone felt it. George turned his back on the crowd without saying another word. His footsteps were slow, but each one carried the weight of disappointment and heartbreak. He didn't look back as he walked straight into the house. Once inside, he climbed the stairs quickly and slammed his bedroom door, the sound echoing through the grand hallways like thunder. He sank down beside the window, his arms wrapped around his knees, eyes locked on the garden outside, the same place Orla used to run freely. His thoughts raced. He couldn't understand why anyone would take her away. To him, Orla wasn't just a pet. She was his best friend. She had listened when no one else did. She brought happiness that no toy or royal title could ever give. His chest ached from the confusion and anger. Both emotions tangled together like a knot that wouldn't loosen. That evening, the birthday cake sat untouched on the table. Kate had decorated it herself, topping it with colorful candies shaped like Orla and her tiny puppies. But George never came down to blow out the candles. He didn't open any of his presents, didn't respond when his parents knocked on his door, and didn't speak a word to anyone. William and Kate stood quietly outside his room, exchanging a look that said more than words ever could. This wasn't just a child being stubborn. This was something deeper. George was learning to stand firm for what mattered to him, even if it meant standing alone against the people closest to him. As the next morning dawned, a soft layer of mist covered Sandringham, making the estate look calm but distant, as if hiding secrets beneath its beauty. Kate had barely slept the night before. She had stayed curled up in the private quarters of their family's section of the estate, separate from where King Charles and Camilla were staying. It had always been that way. A quiet effort to keep their family space free from outside control. She held Charlotte and Louis close as they slept peacefully, but her thoughts kept circling around George. Her son had locked himself away, and she felt every ounce of his sadness as if it were her own. By morning, Kate's sadness had hardened into resolve. She wasn't going to wait for permission. As a mother, it was her duty to protect her children, no matter who stood in the way. With quiet determination, she stepped out of the private wing. Her heels tapped steadily against the polished floor as she moved through the long corridor that connected different parts of the estate. She was heading straight to the east side, where she knew Camilla had settled after yesterday's event. The tea room, where Camilla sat that morning, was warm and cozy. The scent of strong English tea filled the air, and delicate porcelain cups rested on the table. Camilla was busy speaking with 2 royal staff members, going over future engagements, public tours, speeches, all designed to keep the crown's image polished and perfect. But all of that faded the moment Kate entered. She didn't knock. She didn't pause. She opened the door and walked in, her expression calm but firm, her eyes sharp with purpose. She spoke clearly, making it known that they needed to speak right away. Even though they were under the same roof for the party, Camilla had crossed a line by interfering in their private family space, and that could not be ignored. Camilla looked up, surprised by Kate's sudden entrance. She had never seen her like this before. The woman she often considered quiet and polite was now standing tall with a confidence that filled the room. Still, Camilla kept her expression composed. Years of royal life had taught her to show calm even when storms were brewing. She gave a small nod to her aides, who quickly gathered their things and slipped out, closing the door gently behind them. Now it was just the two of them, and everything that had been left unsaid was about to surface. The tea room grew unbearably quiet, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The soft ticking of the wall clock was the only sound, counting down to the moment everything would change. Kate didn't sit. She remained standing, her back straight, hands clenched tightly at her sides to keep the anger inside from spilling out. She looked directly at Camilla, her voice steady but sharp, and reminded her that she had no authority to remove Orla from a party hosted by William and herself in their own home. Camilla hadn't come to take control. She was invited as a guest, not to make choices that hurt their child or disturb the peace of their family. Camilla didn't flinch. A small smile crept across her lips, cold and mocking. Her reply came with a tone that barely hid her disapproval. She insisted she had acted as queen consort and claimed she couldn't allow a dog to run around freely during a formal event. In her view, such things made the royal family appear careless. She spoke of tradition, dignity, and public image as if that mattered more than a child's happiness on his birthday. But Kate stepped forward, her cheeks flushed and her voice filled with emotion that she kept just below the surface. She told Camilla it didn't matter what she couldn't tolerate. What mattered was George. It was his day, a day meant for laughter and warmth, not for tears caused by someone else's decisions. Orla wasn't just a pet to their son. She was his safe place, the one who stood by him when the world outside felt too heavy. Kate reminded her that she and William had worked hard to give their children a life away from the strict, cold rules that had shaped the older generation. Camilla suddenly stood, her calm now slipping. Her voice rose as she pushed back, questioning who Kate thought she was to speak so boldly. She defended her actions by claiming she was protecting the family's public image. To her, removing the dog was solving a problem. Whether the younger royals liked their independence or not, she believed she had done the right thing. But Kate didn't move back. She stepped even closer, her eyes fixed firmly on Camilla's. She told her what mattered most wasn't the crown or titles, it was being a mother. And no matter how royal Camilla thought she was not George's mother, and had no place giving orders in a home that wasn't hers. Then she made it crystal clear. From that day forward, Camilla would never be welcome at her children's birthdays again. There would be no more involvement, no more presence, and no more control. And if that boundary was ever crossed again, it would damage more than just one day. It would change the entire relationship between their families. The words sank in deeply. Camilla's polished image finally cracked. The usual charm in her expression faded. She didn't argue, she didn't apologize. She just gave the smallest nod, one that said she understood what was at stake, even if she didn't agree. Kate turned around and walked out. Her heart was still pounding from the confrontation, but she didn't regret a single word. She had drawn a line, one she had needed to draw for a long time. Her thoughts returned to George, the boy whose tears had sparked this fire. She made a quiet promise to herself. No matter what it took, she would protect him and his siblings from being hurt by the same old battles that had haunted the royal family for generations. Camilla's decision that shattered a prince's birthday. Later that afternoon, soft sunlight poured through the tall windows of Sandringham. In a room tucked away from the noise, King Charles sat at his desk with a pen in his hand, papers scattered in front of him. Usually he found peace working on his environmental projects, but not today. His eyes didn't focus. His mind kept drifting back to the party, George's angry face, William's strong words, and the uncomfortable quiet that followed. He had seen it all, and though no one had spoken to him directly about what had happened, the message was loud and clear. Something inside the family had shifted, and it might never be the same again. Behind closed doors, King Charles sat in quiet frustration. Outwardly, he had kept his usual calm, as a father and grandfather expected to hold things together. But deep down, the weight of everything that had happened the day before was pressing hard. The room felt still, but his heart was not. That stillness shattered the moment William stepped in. His steps were firm, his voice controlled, but the disappointment in his eyes was unmistakable. He closed the door behind him, making it clear that this conversation couldn't wait any longer. Charles didn't ask what it was about. He already knew. He had seen it all unfold, the heartbreak, the tears, the confrontation. But William didn't hold back. He pointed out what everyone had been feeling but hadn't said aloud. Orla was taken away simply because Camilla didn't like her presence, and that one decision had turned a child's joyful day into one full of sorrow. George was crushed, Kate was heartbroken, and the family that had worked so hard to stay close now felt completely shaken. William told his father the truth. He couldn't stay silent anymore. Something needed to be done. Charles didn't answer right away. He stood still, gripping the arm of his chair. His mind raced, emotions battling between duty and family. He finally gave the order. His secretary was called, and Camilla was asked to join them at once. When Camilla entered, she held her usual royal grace, her posture perfect, her face calm, but her eyes gave away her mood, ready to defend herself. She sat across from her husband, waiting for him to speak first. Charles didn't waste time with gentle talk. His words were direct and heavy, filled with the pain of what he had seen. He questioned her actions, asked why she had chosen to act in a way that disregarded a child's feelings. George was just 12, and Orla was more than a dog to him. She was his best friend. Charles reminded her that she had turned what should have been a joyful birthday into something the boy might never forget, for the wrong reasons. He had seen George's face, heard his voice break, watched Kate step in as a mother protecting her son, and through it all, Camilla stood firm, unmoved by the damage. Still, Camilla didn't budge. She sat tall, explaining her choice with a cool, firm tone. She said she had only acted to protect the royal image. A dog running through a formal party didn't sit right with her. It looked messy, she claimed, not fitting for a family seen as a symbol of elegance. She believed she had made the right call for the sake of tradition, and now she wanted Charles to understand that too. But her reasoning only added to the fire that had been building inside Charles. His face turned red, his voice suddenly rising like thunder in the small room. The anger he had held back now erupted. He told her it wasn't a dog that had damaged the royal family. It was the lack of compassion, the coldness toward a child who was supposed to feel safe in his own home. Camilla hadn't just upset the party. She had shaken the heart of the family. Charles didn't speak as king at that moment. He spoke as a grandfather who had seen his grandson in tears. He spoke as a man who had watched his daughter-in-law stand alone against something that should never have happened. He reminded Camilla that he had seen her give the order, witnessed everything, and now heard her try to justify it. And he made it painfully clear that this wasn't about control. It was about kindness, and that somewhere along the way that had been forgotten. The room sat in silence again, but this time the tension was even stronger. The damage had already been done, and the pain now echoed through every part of the royal home. This was supposed to be a simple birthday for a child, not a formal royal event, but the argument between Charles and Camilla had become the most intense it had ever been, right in front of William, who silently stood by his father, showing that the younger generation wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. Camilla stood up, her voice high and full of emotion, clearly hurt by what she felt was unfair treatment. She claimed she had only been trying to protect the image Charles had worked his whole life to preserve. She challenged him, asking why he hadn't stopped her earlier if he thought she was wrong. Charles didn't raise his voice again. He answered in a calm but deeply disappointed tone. He said he had stayed quiet then, only to avoid making a scene in front of the children and guests. But now the issue wasn't about how the public would see them. It was about the people within the family. He reminded her that behind the crown, they were still human. And yesterday she had completely dismissed the feelings of a child. Her actions didn't just hurt George, they had also shaken the trust between her and both William and Kate. The conversation dragged on for several more minutes. Charles kept pressing the truth, that what she did was careless, and it had caused real damage to their already delicate family ties. Camilla left without apologizing, her face pale and shaken though she held on to her pride. The argument had left something unspoken but undeniable between them. For the first time, a clear line had been drawn, a division between old royal values and the new, between control and compassion. Charles sat back in his chair, quietly exhaling. He knew the worst wasn't over. This rift, if not handled carefully, could tear the family further apart. And no matter how much he tried to focus on fixing things, he couldn't shake the image of George's tearful, betrayed expression. As night fell over Sandringham like a thick curtain, covering the cracks forming inside the royal home, the dinner table told its own quiet story. Everyone sat around it, but no one really looked at each other. The clinking of forks and knives filled the space where conversation should have lived. George's chair remained empty. He was still in his room, unwilling to join anyone. Charlotte and Louis sat quietly, their young eyes glancing between their parents, sensing the heaviness in the air but not fully understanding it. Charles sat at the head of the table, his usual calm replaced by visible exhaustion. His mind was still on everything he had witnessed, from Camilla's command to remove Orla, to Kate's outburst, to the painful silence that now stretched between everyone. Camilla, seated beside him, tried to smile, but avoided looking in William's direction. She knew very well where he stood on the matter. Later that evening, William and Kate slipped away from the heavy silence into a small sitting room by the fireplace, a quiet spot where they often shared honest conversations, away from the constant eyes of the palace. The fire gave the space a soft glow. Kate sat on the sofa, holding a teacup tightly in her hands, trying to keep them from shaking. Her face showed the strain of the day, the lingering weight from her confrontation with Camilla. Her voice trembled slightly, but held firm as she told William what had been on her heart. She said she couldn't let people who didn't truly care for their children control their lives. George already carried more than most children his age, and losing Orla because of someone else's cold decision had only added more pain. She told William that earlier that day she had told Camilla she wouldn't be welcome at any of their children's birthdays again. She admitted she wasn't sure if she even had the right to make that kind of decision when it came to someone with Camilla's title. But she also knew that if they didn't start protecting their family now, this kind of hurt would keep happening again and again. Kate wasn't just speaking as a royal, she was speaking as a mother who had watched her son fall apart on what was supposed to be his happiest day. And William, quietly listening beside her, knew she was right. The lines had been crossed, and this time they couldn't be erased. So what do you think about Queen Camilla's attitude towards the young royal? Do you think Kate was right for confronting her? Let's hear from you in the comments. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.